They broke into my ranch at 2:17 a.m. No knock. No phone call. Just headlights slicing through the dark, the crunch of gravel under tires, and the sharp snap of bolt cutters on my steel gate. Leading the charge was a woman in a reflective vest, arms crossed, barking orders like she'd been appointed by the state, some smug Karen with a clipboard and a sense of entitlement that could fill a barn. What she didn't know, and what none of them realized, was that I wasn't just the owner of that ranch. I was also the sheriff of the entire district, and they'd just made the dumbest mistake of their lives. You'd think, after 30 years wearing a badge, chasing down meth heads on backcountry highways and mediating family feuds over property lines, I'd have seen every kind of trouble. But retirement brought a new breed of chaos I never saw coming. HOA patrols with clipboards, power trips, and one woman in particular, Karen McCaffrey, president of the Oak Hollow Homeowners Association, who took the whole thing way too seriously. She wasn't just enforcing rules. She was weaponizing them. Now, to be clear, I didn't move to Oak Hollow by choice. My late wife inherited the place, 8.2 acres of rolling Texas pasture, a 2-story log cabin, and memories of her daddy, who once farmed the land. It was his pride and joy. But then a developer rolled in, slapped down a golf course, ringed it with cookie-cutter McMansions, and called it a planned community. With that came the HOA. And with the HOA came Karen. They didn't like that my fence was made of old cedar instead of white vinyl. They didn't like that I had a working barn. They took issue with my flagpole being over 15 feet tall. And they really didn't like that I refused to pay their so-called rural aesthetic compliance fee, $1.25 a month to keep my grass under 4 inches. Give me a break. At first, it was just letters. Polite threats typed in cursive fonts. Then came the citations, $50 for unauthorized livestock, $70 for non-regulation roofing materials, $150 for using native plants in my landscaping. Yes, you heard that right. Apparently, bluebonnets were against the rules unless they came from the HOA's approved nursery. I ignored most of it, figuring they'd run out of steam. But Karen was relentless. She ran the HOA board like it was her personal militia. She manipulated votes, banned proxy submissions unless pre-approved, and used community funds to install surveillance cameras on private driveways. One week, she convinced 2 well-meaning but gullible retired neighbors to vote in a routine inspection protocol, which somehow gave her the authority to send HOA patrols onto private property for safety and uniformity. Most folks just let it slide. I didn't. I sent her a cease and desist. She called me combative. I told her I'd involve the sheriff's department. She laughed. She had no idea I was the sheriff, just not in uniform anymore. But the night they broke in, that's when things went from petty to criminal. I was home recovering from shoulder surgery. My nephew, who'd just been promoted to deputy, was staying with me to help out. We had all the paperwork, official no trespassing signs, an injunction filed with the county against further HOA inspections. None of it mattered to Karen. At exactly 2:17 a.m., my security floodlights snapped on. 3 SUVs rolled up the gravel drive. The gate, a 10-foot steel ranch gate I'd welded myself, was cut clean open. One of the patrol guys held bolt cutters. Karen stood behind him, arms crossed, wearing that reflective vest like she was leading a federal disaster response. I watched the security footage later. She actually said, "We have reason to believe he's harboring illegal structures." Illegal structures? Lady, it's a chicken coop and a woodshed. My nephew was already reaching for his badge when I stepped out, arm in a sling, one hand on the Remington 870 we keep by the mudroom. I didn't aim it. Didn't have to. They froze. One guy even peed himself a little. And Karen? She had the nerve to ask, "Are you threatening us?" I said, "No, ma'am. I'm identifying myself. Sheriff Daniel Holt. This property is under protection of the Travis County Sheriff's Department. And your little HOA stunt just became felony trespass. Congratulations." She went pale, then red, then pale again. And that was just the beginning. Let me back up a bit. Karen McCaffrey didn't always run Oak Hollow like her personal dictatorship. There was a time, She was just a bitter retiree with a clipboard and a dream of perfectly uniform lawns, identical mailboxes, and a world where nobody parked a pickup truck in front of their own house. She wasn't elected HOA president. She seized it like a raccoon claiming a trash can. Her rise started with what she called the Beautification Initiative, which in plain English meant, let's find all the retirees who don't hire landscapers. She'd walk around in a beige pantsuit, measuring grass with a ruler like she was in CSI, Lawn Division. Then came the newsletters, 4 pages of passive-aggressive policy changes written in Comic Sans. Slowly, one by one, the sensible board members retired or moved, and Karen replaced them with her bridge club friends, who'd vote yes on anything as long as wine coolers were served at the meetings. I didn't attend HOA meetings. I had better things to do, like healing my shoulder, feeding my chickens, and avoiding listening to a grown woman throw a tantrum over the color of someone's bird bath. But after the break-in, everything changed. The morning after the raid, I contacted the county attorney's office. I called in favors with 3 former deputies. And I reached out to my niece, who, as luck would have it, worked for the local news station. I didn't want revenge. I wanted exposure. Here's the part that really got under my skin. After being caught trespassing, Karen doubled down. She filed a complaint with the HOA board, claiming I'd brandished a firearm in a non-compliant zoning area. She dug up some dusty clause from the '98 community guidelines, back when the area was just tract homes and nobody had livestock. According to her, my chicken coop was agriculturally nonconforming, which meant my entire property wasn't eligible for residential firearm exemptions. In her words, you're not legally permitted to use a shotgun to defend livestock if the HOA doesn't recognize your land as agricultural. I nearly choked on my coffee. Meanwhile, my nephew filed an official report with the sheriff's department. Karen and her patrol had trespassed, damaged private property by cutting the gate, and attempted an unauthorized inspection. No warrant, no jurisdiction. It didn't stop her. 3 days later, I got a letter from the HOA attorney, a kid who probably passed the bar last Thursday, demanding $1,200 in fines and threatening a lien on my property if I didn't comply with structural adjustments. I called him, asked if he knew the HOA had committed felony trespass on protected property. Dead silence. Then he stammered something about reviewing internal policy and hung up. That weekend, I decided it was time to attend my first HOA board meeting. Oh, it was glorious. I walked in wearing my sheriff's badge, not to intimidate, but to remind everyone who they were dealing with. My nephew came in full uniform. Karen was already there, sitting dead center under an American flag. She ironically insisted everyone salute, despite once trying to fine a veteran for flying one on his porch. The room was packed. Folks brought lawn chairs. Someone brought kettle corn. When I stood up to speak, I brought receipts, security footage, audio recordings, cease and desist letters, property surveys, a notarized letter from the previous HOA president stating that my land was grandfathered in, exempt from zoning ordinances, and outside the scope of HOA jurisdiction. I ended with this. Now you can choose to side with someone who broke into a sheriff's ranch at 2 a.m. with bolt cutters and a flashlight, or you can vote to remove her and avoid being named in the civil suit I'll be filing Monday morning. You could have heard a pin drop. Karen stood up, red in the face, and said, verbatim, "This is a witch hunt against strong women who care about neighborhood order." From the back of the room, someone yelled, "Karen, you wrote up Mrs. Douglas for having pink flamingos. You ain't Joan of Arc." She stormed out. The board voted 4-1 to suspend her indefinitely pending review. But Karen? She wasn't finished. 3 days later, a new letter arrived, not from the HOA but from code enforcement. Karen had filed a complaint with the county, claiming my barn violated setback requirements, saying it was within 50 feet of a designated drainage easement. Which, of course, was baloney. The easement was 70 feet away and on my land. This was her next tactic. If she couldn't win through the HOA, she'd weaponize bureaucracy. She even got one of her wine club buddies, who happened to work in the zoning office, to accidentally flag my property for inspection.
I saw where this was going.
And I was done playing defense. That night, I opened a file I hadn't touched in years, a comprehensive binder from my time as sheriff. Zoning maps, HOA litigation precedents, land use law, case files. I started building my case, not just against Karen, but against the entire HOA board for willful negligence, abuse of power, and misappropriation of funds. Turns out, Karen had been reimbursing herself from HOA dues for things like patrol gas, mileage, administrative labor, and, no joke, a presidential wardrobe stipend. She even submitted an expense for public speaking training. I packaged everything, got in touch with a property rights attorney, and sent a formal complaint to the state's HOA Oversight Board. The next board meeting? Oh, you're going to love that. But let's just say the look on Karen's face when I read aloud her reimbursement form for a $482 handbag labeled Official Presentation Materials was worth every second. After that second meeting, where I exposed her presidential wardrobe reimbursements, most folks thought the story was over. Case closed. The queen of the HOA was dethroned. But no. Karen was like one of those inflatable lawn Santas. Knock her down, and 10 minutes later, she's puffed right back up, waving smugly at traffic. And this time, she wasn't playing HOA politics. She went full scorched earth. The week after her suspension, she started showing up at people's homes, knocking on doors, clipboard in hand, spreading rumors like dandelion seeds in a storm. Sheep poop lowers property value, she told the Petersons. Holt's using his chickens to claim agricultural tax exemptions, she whispered to the O'Neills. He's got illegal ammo stored in that barn, she muttered to anyone who'd listen. It was like watching suburban McCarthyism unfold in real time. And to make matters worse, she started rallying a splinter group. Folks she'd wined and dined over the years, neighbors she'd flattered and manipulated into believing they were part of some righteous crusade. With HOA potlucks and community improvement committees, they started calling themselves the Restoration Council. Real original. They held unofficial meetings at the clubhouse, which, by the way, Karen still had the keys to, and began quietly suggesting that people with non-standard properties should consider selling and relocating somewhere more appropriate. Spoiler alert, I was at the top of their hit list. But I wasn't the only one they came after. Mrs. Tradiel, who ran a tiny candle business out of her garage, got reported to the county for unlicensed chemical storage. Tom, the retired mechanic with an old Pontiac on blocks in his driveway, was flagged for visible junk vehicles. And sweet Elma, 86 years old and living alone, received a notice for an unauthorized window decal, a Christmas snowflake she'd put up in 2014 and simply forgotten to take down. It was getting absurd. And then it got personal. One morning, I stepped outside to feed the chickens and saw it. My rose bushes, the ones my late wife had planted with her own hands, hacked to pieces. Stems ripped out, soil overturned. Mulch scattered like a raccoon had gone on a rampage. No note. No witnesses. But there, parked 3 driveways down, was Karen's SUV. She was walking her dog at 5:45 a.m., conveniently close enough to have seen everything. I didn't confront her. Not yet. I just smiled and waved. That same day, my internet went out. Then my water pressure dropped to a trickle. The trash company skipped my pickup, saying they'd received a notice from the HOA that I was under compliance review. And the kicker? My mailbox was spray-painted with the words *zoning leech. That's when it hit me. This wasn't just about rules or control anymore. This was personal warfare. The next HOA meeting felt like a church revival, charged, loud, full of side-eye and passive aggression. Half the room came to support me. The other half, Karen's choir. The folks who'd never forgiven me for building a real barn, using gravel instead of turf, or daring to fly a flag taller than 15 feet. Things got heated fast. "She's not even on the board anymore," someone shouted. "She's still a property owner," another shot back. "I heard he threatened her with a gun. He's a sheriff. You are the gun." I didn't say a word. I just listened, because I could see what was happening. The community, once close-knit, was fracturing. Lifelong neighbors were avoiding each other, picking sides over lawn ornaments and porch lights. And Karen? She thrived on it. Chaos was her fertilizer. She filed 3 more county complaints in 1 week. Her cronies created a fake Facebook group called the Oak Hollow Preservation Society, filled with cropped photos and twisted captions accusing me of everything from illegal dumping to tax fraud. And Ricky, her little clipboard lackey, started parking directly in front of my gate every morning for his walks, even though his house was half a mile away. I wasn't angry anymore. I was impressed. This was psychological warfare, abuse of public systems, all wrapped in a beige pantsuit and a clipboard. And somehow, she was still sipping wine coolers on her porch every evening like it was just another day in HOA paradise. Then came the final straw. The county issued a temporary stop order on my property, pending review of alleged environmental runoff violations. That meant I couldn't sell, renovate, or lease anything until the case was resolved. Want to guess who filed that complaint?
Karen.
She used drone photos taken by her nephew, who worked part-time for a landscaping company with a cheap DJI drone and no license. They'd flown it over my barn, claimed to find evidence of chemical leakage. In reality, it was just chicken feed runoff after a rainstorm. I had the samples tested, completely harmless. But the damage was done. My farm insurance started asking questions. My bank froze the equity line I was using to make repairs. I was being bled dry slowly, methodically, and legally. That night, I sat on the porch with 2 fingers of bourbon. Not because I was giving up. Because I knew I was about to go all in. I made 3 calls. 1 to my property rights attorney. 1 to my niece at the news station. And 1 to Deputy Harlan, my old partner, who now worked for the County Ethics Commission. Then I waited. Within 2 weeks, the story broke on local news. Retired sheriff targeted by rogue HOA president. Zoning laws as weapons. It had everything: video footage, maps, voice recordings, and a very photogenic rooster named Dale, who strutted right into the camera like he was auditioning for a reality show. Public opinion shifted fast. Karen got bombarded with questions. People started pulling out of the Restoration Council. Even some of her loyalists, like Mrs. Grady, posted on Nextdoor saying maybe they'd taken things too far. The Ethics Commission launched an investigation into the illegally obtained drone footage, the false county complaints, the HOA funds being misused. Suddenly, Karen's little empire was starting to crack. The County Board of Supervisors doesn't usually draw a crowd. Most meetings are just 3 retirees arguing about potholes, someone ranting about chemtrails, and a clerk in the back pretending not to hear any of it. But not this time. They had to open up the auditorium. Half of Oak Hollow showed up, clutching manila folders, folding chairs, iced coffees. There were journalists, local activists, and even a guy live-streaming on Facebook wearing a t-shirt that said, "Don't mess with the sheriff or his chickens."
Why?
Because on that day, the agenda included something rare, a public hearing on allegations of HOA abuse, fraudulent zoning claims, and civil harassment. And the star witness? Yours truly. Let me tell you, I've testified in murder trials. I've spoken at DEA briefings. I once stood on the Senate floor in D.C. for a task force report. But walking up to that little podium, facing a room full of neighbors, a swarm of local media, and Karen McCaffrey sitting dead center in the front row, lips pursed like she'd just bitten into a lemon dipped in vinegar, was something else entirely. She showed up dressed like she was both on trial and running for mayor, navy blazer, pearl necklace, thick binder full of evidence on her lap. Her backup crew, the Restoration Council, sat in the second row, whispering like middle schoolers at a PTA meeting. I cleared my throat, clicked the mic on, and said, "Good afternoon. I'm Daniel Holt, property owner, veteran, retired sheriff, and apparently public enemy number 1 of Oak Hollow's most enthusiastic HOA president." The crowd chuckled. Karen did not. I laid it all out, plain, slow, like I was reading bedtime stories to the legally challenged. The trespass incident, complete with time-stamped footage and audio of Karen barking orders. The sworn deputy's report. The fraudulent complaints, county forms with identical phrasing, all submitted under her nephew's login. The HOA fund abuse, reimbursement records for handbags, wine, executive travel, and meals at Olive Garden. The illegally obtained drone footage, exposed by flight logs and a statement from the drone operator's boss, who had no idea his equipment was being used for a personal vendetta. But the final blow? That was beautiful. I pulled out a 24-inch Wild F-36 printed land use map from 1994, filed with the county clerk, that proved my property line had never changed. And more importantly, that due to an old annexation clause overlooked in all their paperwork, my land was legally exempt from HOA regulation. Then I dropped the hammer. Which means, ladies and gentlemen, I said, that for the past 3 years, Karen McCaffrey and her so-called HOA have been attempting to enforce rules on land that is not under their jurisdiction. Every fine, every letter, every complaint, baseless. Every attempt to damage my reputation, defamatory. Every resource used from HOA funds, misappropriated. Gasps. Literal gasps. Someone in the back whispered, "She's toast." Then the chair recognized Karen. Of course they did. She stood up like a villain in a church play, calm, cold, calculated. She launched into a speech that sounded confident if you weren't really listening. "This isn't about personal vendettas," she began. "It's about community standards, protecting property values, preserving the integrity of a neighborhood that was frankly falling apart before I took office." She waved her binder like it was the Constitution, accused me of weaponizing legal intimidation, said I was inciting division, even claimed I was endangering seniors by refusing to comply with uniform safety codes. But she slipped up. Oh, she slipped up bad. In her dramatic closing, she said, "And if this board allows one man to exempt himself from the rules just because he used to be sheriff, then what's to stop every other?" I raised one hand. Not rudely, just enough to stop her. "Ma'am," I said, "that's not why I'm exempt. I'm exempt because your HOA's borders end 2 lots before my driveway. It's right there in the original plat map. Page 3. I handed the document to the chairperson. Dead silence. Even the guy live streaming stopped chewing his jerky. What followed was like watching a slow-motion implosion. Board members flipped through the documents. Karen fidgeted. Her backup crew started inching away. One of them actually stood up and said, "I didn't know she was using HOA money for pantyhose reimbursements." Karen turned red, then purple. When the board chairwoman finally spoke, she said, "We are placing a motion to forward this case to the district attorney's office for formal investigation. Furthermore, we recommend that Ms. McCaffrey be removed from all community leadership positions, effective immediately." Thunderous applause. Not polite clapping, full-on whooping. Someone even yelled, "Lock her up." Not my style, but I understood the energy. Karen stormed out, clutching her binder like it was a lifeline, muttering something about slander and injustice. But the truth was out. The records didn't lie. And for the first time in years, the air in Oak Hollow felt a little lighter.